Hello and good morning and good afternoon to some of those on the other side of the planet. Thank you so much for coming in for one of our first naturally intense fitness training seminars. And I'd like to start off by introducing myself. I'm Kevin Richardson, the founder of Naturally Intense. And today I will be here with my fantastic staff. There is Erica Citron.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming out.
And Tiffany Menges.
Hi, good morning.
And today we are going to be talking mainly about weight loss and how do you maintain and conduct a strategy for effective weight loss in times of reduced activity. And what we're going to do the entire seminar in two parts. The first part will be pretty much me talking, giving a bit of a background of how things work and how we see the weight loss problem and have seen the weight loss problem in times with reduced activity and what the good points are and the bad points are. And while I am speaking, or at any point in time, if you have a question, do feel free to send the question in our chat. Both Tiffany and Erica will be monitoring the chat at all times, and they'll read out the questions to me if I don't see them myself. And we'll try to get it to as many questions as possible, because the idea when we do a seminar is not just to present information, but also to be able to answer the questions that you have, which makes every seminar not just unique, but it makes it relevant to you, our audience. And it's really a privilege to be in a place where, you have all these decades of experience helping people lose weight and be able to keep it off long term. And it's our mission to try to share that information as much as humanly possible. And that's what we're going to try to do as much as we can today. So thank you so much for coming in, and we're going to get started. So to start, we'll talk about here and globally, we're all in the same boat in terms of there's been a massive reduction in most people's activity due to the lockdowns that have been put in because of COVID-19. Here in New York City, we've been on lockdown pretty much since the beginning of mid-March or so, and we're only just starting to come back to some form of normalcy, although in other parts of the US, the virus is still raging, so they're kind of going back into a lockdown state, and we really and truly don't know what the future is going to hold. Gyms are closed. People are working from home much more than they ever did before. And just in terms of general activity, because we're confined and because we're not as active as we were before, a lot of people are finding that they're putting some extra weight on. They find that they're not walking as much, they're not active as much, and they attribute the lack of activity to the weight gain that tends to happen. And there's some good news from that, and there's some bad news from that. I think it's important to understand the framework as to how our bodies actually work, and then we have to understand how human behavior interacts with the framework of how our bodies work, because they aren't always necessarily lined up very, very well. And what we'll talk about today is what tends to happen when your activity levels slow down. Now, a great analogy that I like to bring out, and it's one that it's easy for people to relate to, is the dancer. And Erica is a professional dancer, and she knows a lot about this. In fact, Erica is actually one of the people we'll use. So both Erica and another trainer of ours were both in dance schools, and they would dance 8 hours a day, over and over, dancing, burning a lot of calories in the process. And it was something that in the life of a dancer, it's pretty much that you're dancing all the time. When you're in school, it's non-stop activity. It's just completely non-stop. And at some point, there was graduation. And when graduation happened for the first trainer of ours, she immediately lost a significant amount of body fat. And she started to get that look. She was terrified that she was going to lose, the body that she had. She was going to get bigger and blow up, but she didn't. But keep in mind that she was training with us at the same time. So she was doing weight training at that time. And she went from dancing, let's say 8-9 hours a day plus weight training to just weight training. And eating the same amount of calories, having the same input as far as nutrition is concerned. The only difference is that her activity levels went down. But somehow she lost weight. So not that long later, Erica also stopped dancing. And Erica was really, really, really worried about what was going to happen when she stopped dancing. And I told her she had absolutely nothing to worry about. And that the fact that she stopped, at this point in time, she was training with us as well 3 times a week. When she stopped, she would see a huge reduction in her body weight and in her body fat, and she'd see an increase in her muscle mass. She didn't really believe me, but time went on. She was able to see a difference in how she looked. And I think that having worked with so many former dancers as well, it's usually the opposite. What tends to happen is that most people who are dancers will be doing a lot of activity, and then they'll stop. And when they stop, they won't be doing anything at all. And they're going to be eating pretty much the same way that they were eating before. But the problem is that if you are doing a lot of activity, your body is always going to try to find a way to get to a place of balance with it. I'm going to talk a little bit about that balance. Tiffany, actually, when Tiffany started with us all those years ago, it seems like yesterday, but it has been a while now. Tiffany came from a traditional weight training background where she would work out almost every day. Mm-hmm. And I think almost everyone who comes to us who is into weight training or any kind of fitness will work out every single day. And when she came on, all of our trainers, they don't just train our clients, they actually do the same workouts that the clients do, same workouts that I do. We all train together, actually. And, you can see there's a little bit of skepticism of, well, I'm training all these days and it's kind of what I do, like working out is kind of my thing, is what I do. And if I do less, how am I going to lose body fat and trim down if I'm doing less? And, she couldn't really wrap her head around that. And I think it's as someone who, if anybody's read my articles, will know that I'm very much a science-based person, and science is about experimentation and skepticism and healthy skepticism and doing experiments and seeing what the results are. And I think that what happened with Tiffany was that she was surprised to see that within several weeks, her body fat level did drop because she was doing less activity. Now, the intensity was different as well, and we'll talk about intensity a little further down the line. But the bottom line is that there's always this fear that if I do less, if I'm walking less, that somehow I'm going to, put massive amounts of weight on. And in so doing, it can sometimes be, unfortunately, a self-fulfilling prophecy in that because we don't take into consideration the changes in our behaviors, we just attribute and kind of think, well, I'm going to gain weight no matter what. And so you probably will. I'm going to preface the entire conversation about losing weight in a period of reduced activity by saying something that might sound controversial, but when I explain it, it won't be at all. This is the best and the easiest time to lose weight. If in your entire life you've had difficulty trying to lose weight and you're struggling and you are all over the place with your eating and everything else, if you are working from home, if you're working less hours, if you're not as active as you were before, this is the time to lose weight. And let's talk about why that is and how it works and why it would work. First off, the human body. The human body is a fantastic instrument that's the product of the harshness of the environment that we were created and grew up and evolved in. So we are literally nothing but an adaptation to whatever environment that we are in. And it's important whenever we talk about weight loss to bring in the idea of evolution and how what we were as a species 2 million years ago, 1 million years ago, 500,000 years ago affects how our bodies work right now. The bodies that we inhabit and the bodies that we use today are identical in almost every single form and fashion from the bodies of our ancestors all those years ago. In fact, the way that we eat today didn't really come into something that was more of a global phenomenon. We all pretty much eat more or less the same in terms of having access to processed foods until I'd probably say the mid to late 20th century. So it's not something that our body had that much time. Our bodies have had that much time to adapt to. What our bodies are adapted to and what they're designed for is to conserve energy. Now, if we think about any of those National Geographic documentaries that you've probably seen over the years with the hunter-gatherer tribe, or if anybody has had the privilege and to be able to go to somewhere where you could see an indigenous people, no one's overweight. Everyone looks, in really good shape. Not just good shape, but really good shape. They look like athletes. Everyone has all the guys have a little bit of biceps, even the older guys. All the people have a little bit of a six-pack. It's pretty much how they look. No one's overweight. No one's carrying a beer belly. The dad bods aren't there. No one has really like love handles. It's not really the look that they have. Now, that's the way that the human body has been for hundreds of thousands of years. About 1 million generations of people, all of our ancestors, we go back in time and look at all of our ancestors, even those people who will say, well, I come from a family of people who are pretty much heavy and on the heavier side. Well, they're on the heavier side nowhere near 100,000 years ago, and they were not on the heavier side 200,000 years ago. And the further and further and further you go back, no one at all, because being on the heavy side just simply didn't exist. So your body will always think that it looks like an Olympic athlete. Think of it that way. Think in the back of your head that your body thinks that it has the body of an Olympic athlete. It's lean. It doesn't have that much body fat. Okay? It doesn't have that much extra fat stores. It has just enough to get by. Now, the problem is that there's a dissonance between and a discord between how our body is designed from an evolution perspective and the actual bodies that we have today. We are much heavier in general across the board than almost all of our ancestors were because we eat a lot more. We have access to a lot more food, and we also have access to a lot more foods that are designed to make us eat more food. And so we eat more. And so we don't have those bodies anymore. We have bodies where we have, the dad bods. We have bodies where we have to deal with love handles. We have bodies where we have to deal with our stomachs. We have bodies where we can't see our abs anymore. We have bodies where our hips are getting bigger. We have bodies where, body fat, which before was a plus, is now a negative. And we want to get rid of that body fat. But if you think of it from an evolutionary point of view, if your body thinks that it looks like an Olympic athlete across the board, any variations you make in your activity level to try and do more activity, or any variations you do in terms of your energy intake, trying to eat less, it's going to do its best to try to maintain some sort of balance to stop you from losing too much weight. I'm going to say it again. Anything that you do to try to lose weight, it's going to try to stop you because as far as your body's concerned, you already are a little bit on the leaner side. And I can use myself as a pretty good example as well. I maintain a very low body fat percentage all year round because of how I eat. And it allows me to walk around looking a certain way. And yes, six pack is there. Yes, abs are there. Yes, muscles are all showing and everything else. You can see it. It's all well and good, but there's a balance to it because I'm only eating natural foods and I'm not eating any processed foods whatsoever. I only drink water. It's very, very much a diet that's not different from how human beings would have eaten had they had access to the amount of protein that I have access to today, that I'm thankful to have today. But there's a line. There's a line there, even for me. If I lose literally 2 pounds more than I have right now, everything goes into disarray. Everything. Literally, I have a 2 pound threshold that I can play with. If I get 2 pounds lighter, my body says, you're way too light, you're going to die, this is the end of the world, start eating anything and everything that's not bolted down. Okay? So it's there. It is there. There's a point where you have to be careful or you go too far. Now, would my body literally die if I went that low? No, it wouldn't. But my body doesn't know that I can go to the refrigerator and have food whenever I want to. My body doesn't know that my low body fat percentage that I maintain is something I'm doing as an act of volition because I want to look a certain way and I want to be a certain way. It has no way of knowing. All it knows is that it comes from an environment where it's lean and there's not that much in the way of food all the time. And so it has to do its best to conserve. Now, evolution for human beings happened at a time when a word we use today, and you can relate to very, very easily, climate change was occurring. During the period of human evolution, our climate on the planet here was changing rapidly. There's rapid cooling followed by a warming. And that period of time meant that our ancestors had to deal with periods of not so much low food supply, but inconsistent food supply and changes in food supply. So our bodies had to be such that it could survive periods where you didn't have that much food for a long period of time. Now, before I was talking about if I get too lean, my body doesn't know I can go to the refrigerator right over there and eat something. And it's kind of interesting that I'm actually doing a seminar where I can say refrigerator's over there and refrigerator really is over there. But it's that thing where the humans and the human prototypes who were not able to store fat efficiently died out. And they're not here. None of us are descendants of anybody who was fat. Sorry, anybody who was not fat. Anybody who had difficulty putting on fat would have pretty much died. Now, no one was fat because there wasn't enough food and there wasn't enough consistency of food supply for that to happen. And even if we go back to, fast forward to Europe, Europe 1700s, the average person in Europe in the 1700s wasn't eating that many calories. They may have eaten bread, they may have eaten cheese, they may have drunk some alcohol, but the amount of calories that the average person had, unless you were a king or aristocrat, you really weren't taking in that much. So we've never really had as much as we have today, but all of our ancestors and the reason why we are here and the reason why we are human in the first place is because of the fact that we are capable of storing fat. Our bodies are designed to hold on to fat. And because every single activity that our bodies do, evolution period, all the way up to, the advent of industrialization and civilization, modern civilization, where you have supermarkets and you have regular access to food that you didn't have to actually do anything to get. You should use money and you have an exchange system or barter system. That's relatively new. Before, all the exercise that you did, all the activity you did was either to hunt, to gather, or maybe some kind of recreation. But you wouldn't be doing any kind of recreation if you didn't have any food in the first place. So dance is a huge part of how human beings burn calories back in the day, evolution-wise. But if there wasn't enough food, there wasn't that much dancing. So there has to be something that we has to be some form of recognition to the idea that the exercise we do today is also going to affect how our body is going to lose weight or gain weight. And so getting back to reduction in activity and how it all ties in. They did some studies of those very indigenous peoples. They did some studies with the Aborigines. They did some studies with some of the African hunter-gatherer tribes. Did some studies with some of the Amazonian hunter-gatherer tribes. And most of them, for the most part, live lives where almost all the food that they're getting in comes from the work that they have to put out. But there is not full equality in work, in that if some members of the tribe would be the cooks, some member of the tribes would be the caretakers, looking after the children. What the men would do wouldn't necessarily be the same as what the women would do. Women would be more gatherers, men would be more hunters. There's a very big difference between what everyone was doing. Everyone's not doing the same amount of activity. Now, the hunters who went out, and if anybody knows anything about hunting, if you go out, you have to actually stalk an animal. It's a lot of work. It's really a lot of work. And the number of miles that was averaged in the Aborigine tribes and in the African tribes, which were kind of similar, we were talking about people who were walking, 12 miles a day. So 12 miles a day, it's a lot of activity, plus they were hunting, plus they were gathering as long as they're walking along. If you see something, you pick it up, you're gathering as well. And when researchers checked what's called the resting metabolic rate, which is how much calories your body uses while resting, of those who were going out and hunting and those who were staying in the encampment and either caretaking or gathering and not being as active, there was no difference in resting metabolic rate. And in fact, that resting metabolic rate of both the person who was walking 12 miles every day in a culture where their fathers and mothers and their ancestors have been doing that exact same thing for almost a million generations, was not that different of a resting metabolic rate of the sedentary American, male or female. And right there, it kind of throws some water on the fire of the idea of, well, my activity is less, so therefore I'm going to gain weight. Not necessarily. Activity levels and weight gain aren't as intertwined as we think they are. There is some correlation, but it's not as straightforward as it tends to be put out. Now, remember as well, straightforward explanations for things related to weight loss do really well to sell products. They do really well to sell services, sell personal training, sell articles. We live in a world where everyone wants to hear everything in 500 words or less. So it's kind of that it's trying to fit into that, but it's just not that simple, and it's not that linear. It really and truly isn't linear at all. In fact, if you think about the idea of how our body conserves weight, it explains why most people who do lose weight get to that point where your weight loss stops. Because let's suppose you weigh 200 pounds. If you weigh 200 pounds, your resting metabolic rate is going to be such that you need, let's say, I'm going to throw an arbitrary number out there, 2,500 calories to maintain that 200 pounds that you have. And you go on a diet, and now you're 180 pounds. And that diet you're eating was a 2,000 calorie diet, so it's 500 calories less than what you were eating before. At some point, because you've lost weight, the bigger you are, the more calories you burn. At some point, because you've lost weight, your body's going to say, okay, well, we're losing weight, and now we get to an equilibrium where I'm taking enough calories from my new body weight. But it doesn't work that way. You would think it would work that way. It doesn't. The number of calories you take in where your body weight would stop dropping isn't just simply a matter of trying to create a deficit. I need 2,000 calories per day to maintain, 2,500 calories per day to maintain 200 pounds. So all I have to do is just eat 200 calories less or 500 calories less and I'll lose weight. It doesn't work that way. It depends on a number of issues. It depends on your sleep patterns. It depends on how much dieting you did before. It depends on your muscle mass. It depends on how much muscle mass you're losing while you're dieting. It depends on how much muscle mass you're building while you're dieting. It depends on all these external factors that are even more important than your activity level. Your activity level, I would probably say on a scale of 1 to 10, is probably like a 2 in that whole equation. And I'll say that because we all know people who don't do anything, who sit down, watch TV, and they can lose weight like this. So it is possible. It's not that big. It's not that big a part of the equation that we think it is. But you also know people who exercise every single day, and they, literally will do cardio nonstop, and they won't lose a pound. In fact, most people who exercise a lot complain about the fact that they're at that place where you can't lose any more weight because you're putting activity too far in front of the equation. It's just not. It's important, yes, but it's not everything. It's not all about, well, the more active I am, if I burn extra 500 calories from doing cardio, then I'll magically, get into a deficit. If I eat 2,500 calories, if I do 500 calories of exercise, I'll be in deficit. I'll talk a little bit about that and explain it. It gets confusing because a lot of the information we get about fitness, a lot of the information that we get about weight loss is, it's not written. It's more like it's set in stone. It's like someone has a chisel and they chisel it into a rock and nothing can erase it. So there's not an evolution in science. What there tends to be something comes out that supports an idea. An industry is built around that idea. People make a lot of money off of, those particular ideas and that particular industry, that particular way of doing things. And then they realize, wait a minute, that idea isn't 100% accurate. There's more to it. There's more to it. There's more to it. But you already are selling products based on that idea. You're selling services based on that idea. The public already knows about that idea. And the public does not want to read a scientific journal. The last thing that they want to do is read about metabolic rates and indoor calorimetry. Like it's people's eyes glaze over, when they read those things. Mine don't, because it's kind of what I do. But the bottom line is that there's a lot more. It's a lot more complex than it tends to be laid out to be. It's not as simple as calories in, calories out. I'll explain, and I'll also explain how it works with evolution. When calorie counting was first possible, it was done with a mask. You would take a mask, you'd have somebody on a bike or treadmill or whatever, and that person breathing was monitored in that mask while doing the activity, and they could tell pretty much how much carbohydrates was being used, how much fats are being used, how much protein was being used, if any at all, and they could also see how many calories the person was expending and doing in the actual activity. The problem is, it was only measuring during the activity. So we came away with this idea in the 70s and the 80s that, okay, if I go on this particular bike and I go at this particular rate and I weigh this amount, this much, I'll burn this number of calories. This is why when you go to almost any machine, it'll say, okay, at the end of this, you did so many calories. Those are all numbers taken from those experiments, and there were tons of them. They were able to literally say, all right, the average person doing this activity will burn this number of calories. Okay? The problem is that we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in a real world state. And that particular period of doing that activity doesn't represent the reality of the human experience. Indoor calorimetry came along. Indoor calorimetry was very different. Instead of having a mask, a clumsy mask that could only be worn temporarily, they could put you in a room, and that room had sensors that could tell exactly how much carbs you were burning for energy, how much protein, how much fats, and how many calories you were burning. And you could stay in the room for as long as you wanted. What they'd usually do is they'd give you some movies to watch, you'd exercise, and you'd relax. And from there, they could measure your resting metabolic rate after exercising. And what researchers found, which was really not something that people were thinking would happen, but is in line with evolution, is that when someone, let's say, goes on a treadmill and does, let's say, 500 calories worth of exercise activity, over the course of a 24 to 48 hour period, their metabolism will slow down by 500 calories. And I'll say it again. If you do 500 calories worth of work, extra work that you're not used to doing, your body's going to slow down by that extra 500 calories to compensate, to get back to a level of what's called homeostasis, just balance. It's always going to try to do less. Because remember at the beginning we said that our body thinks that your body thinks you're built like an Olympic athlete. Like you only have this much body fat to lose. It really thinks that. So if you do an activity, it's not going to just automatically say, all right, did an activity, take your body fat stores, burn it off because we don't need it. Because keep in mind, if you think about what it means to be human, away from computers, Western civilization, and put us in a natural environment, all of our activity, all the calories, most of the calories that we need to expend will come from us trying to find food. So your body needs to make sure at all times that you have enough calories, energy to go out and get food. Now, what happens with dieting is that if you do a combination of, let's say, extreme exercise, let's suppose you do the tried and true method that some people do of doing aerobics every day and weight training every day. If you do that while reducing your calories, you will inevitably come to a point where you'll start gaining weight. Everyone gets to that point where it just stops, and no matter what they do, they can't go anymore, and they start finding themselves putting on weight. Think of it from the framework of evolution. If you are back in time, go back in time, let's say 500,000 years, you're in a situation, the only situation you would ever be where food supply is low and you're doing a lot of exercise is because you don't have any food. That's the only time. The only time when anyone, long before gyms, Crossfit, anything like those things ever existed, the only time that you do a lot of activity was because you needed a lot of food or you didn't have enough food. Activity and food are completely intertwined. They cannot be separated. It's the same thing. So if for some reason your body is in a place where it's, okay, all of a sudden Kevin's great to the 12th power grandfather is doing all this activity, it's because he doesn't have enough food. So we need to make sure that our body uses as little calories as possible so we can have as much energy as possible to find more food. In fact, in the bodybuilding world, we have the same problem. When you're bodybuilding, I remember talking about those 2 pounds. If I lose 2 more pounds from the body fat that I have right now, 2 more pounds, I can't sleep. My sleep patterns get completely awry. I can't sleep because my body keeps me awake with the idea of, okay, Kevin, you're starving. You need to get up and spend some more time going out there and look for more food. If I do too much activity, if I start, let's say, going on, if I take like long bike rides, that and the other, when my body fat gets to be, really, really low, 2 things will happen. Number 1, I'm going to feel horrible. I feel really, really, really horrible. And number 2, something inside of me is going to start eating no matter how strong I think I am. And the ability to maintain a stable body fat percentage is understanding those limitations, understanding that it's not, there are limits and that our bodies are really and truly designed to maintain body fat. If you go too low, there's going to be a backlash to it. And it's the same thing that everyone goes through on different levels. Because again, too much exercise, too much activity, not enough food, reduction of calories equals your body is starving. So stop the fat loss, maintain as much body fat as possible on your body because you cannot afford to lose any more body fat. So today, situations where activity levels are lower, you would expect then that we probably shouldn't have people gaining that much weight. And I'm going to tell you exactly why most people will gain weight. It's because your eating patterns change. It's easy to put something into, very, very simple 1 + 1 = 2, especially when it makes you feel, kind of absolved of any responsibility of it. And not as it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just that if you were doing 10,000 steps, just use that as an example, and all of a sudden you're now doing 3,000 steps a day. You're not walking around that much. You're in the house. You're not moving around that much. If you're following a diet of predominantly natural foods and you're not overeating and there was no change in your diet whatsoever, you're not going to put on that much weight, if any. Maybe you may put a 1/4 pound on, a 1/2 pound on, maybe, but not that much. It's not that big of a deal. What tends to happen, however, is that because of the fact that if you're exercising, this is for someone who's not exercising at all, you're not even putting in someone exercising. If you're not exercising and your activity level drops, there's no reason for your body to put on extra body fat. It is going to happen if you push it. If you push the envelope and you eat more calories than your body needs, your body says, hey, we've got too much coming in. We can't do anything with this. Store it. That's how you put body fat on. That's just how the biology of human body or any body, any mammal is. Too much calories in is always a problem. If your caloric level is where it's supposed to be, then you're not going to see a difference, even if you're completely inactive. And I think it's something that is a positive thing, in that looking at our clients, I would probably say that our clients right now are experiencing the best results of all the time. I've been training people now for 32 years, and I've never had this many clients looking this good at once. You usually have, one client who's really on the diet, they're sticking with it, doing really, really well, and this one over here, not so well. But a lot of people are doing really, really well because there's consistency. And the most important thing when it comes to weight loss isn't so much about activity, it's consistency. And, it's one of those problems of when you are eating out, eating at different hours, it becomes very difficult to have any kind of consistency. And I would probably say that without getting into the individuality of what every single person needs individually to lose weight in your particular case situation, what I can say is that if you know that you're eating this much food every single day, then you know if you have to go up or if you have to go down. You have a baseline with which to work. However, if you're eating different foods every day and you're eating a varied diet, which people love the idea of eating different things all the time, there's no way for you to monitor exactly how much you're taking in, nor is it possible for you to say that, that the reason why my weight gain or weight loss was because of what you're eating. There has to be that consistency.
I do want to take 1 second, since we're speaking about our clients and we're speaking about consistency with the training and everything they're doing. We did have a question that was asking, how long does it take to commit to a physical regime? My opinion being, it's not about how long it takes you to commit, it's whether you make the decision to commit or not. And it's kind of, I don't know if it's as black and white as you kind of either do it or you don't. There's no halfway midpoint in between. But what would you have to say to that in terms of how long does it take to reach that level of commitment?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks. Human beings, we are all creatures of habit. and habits tend to be formed within very short periods of time. And if you get through the discomfort of changing how you eat, because if you change how you eat, you are going to be uncomfortable. Let's make no bones about it. You're going to be uncomfortable. Everyone on social media who talks about, oh, it's all great, and I eat, I eat this, I eat that, and I do this, I do that, it's all fantastic. No. There's a point where it's going to feel pretty much miserable, usually in the beginning. And as you go along, it becomes better and better because you start feeling better when you're not eating junk food. And as far as diet is concerned, we don't really believe in a diet per se. What we believe in is a way of eating where you're only eating unprocessed foods. That's it. High protein, carbs when you need it for what you're going to do, and unprocessed foods. Now that means a drastic change for most people, and all your carbs have to be high fiber. And that change will mean you're not getting a ton of extra calories, so you're going to feel uncomfortable. But if you can stick with it for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, usually I would probably say in about 80% of the cases, that's what people kind of need. They need that 2 week to get through. Some need more. Some do need more, but on average, I'd probably say it just takes about 2 weeks.
Great, thank you.
Did we have any more questions, Tiffany?
I don't think so. I think that's, oh wait, maybe we have one more. How long do you suggest a workout session should be, and how many times a week does one need to exercise? So this goes really well into what we were discussing earlier about over-exercising as well, which was my problem coming into training personally. Was I was the type that I would work out 2 times a day, almost like 6 days a week. So I don't know if you want to discuss a little bit about our training that we do, or if just in general.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So what we essentially do is we work out 3 times a week. Now we do very intense workouts, intense strength-based training for short periods of time. And you really need to make sure that the intensity level is where it needs to be if you are shortening the workouts in that way. But overexerting yourself can work equally against your process and how much weight you do lose. Because it can actually lower what Kevin was talking about, your resting metabolic rate, is like doing that, over exercising, and extreme dieting as well, not taking in the amount of calories. The combination of the two really just kind of damages your resting metabolic rate, which is what we all aim to be at a healthy level, where we aren't even having to physically be overexerting ourselves to lose weight. And it's just something that we're just doing naturally, that our bodies are just in constant motion doing. So what we do is we work out 10 minutes 3 times a week, and that's it. And that's really all we do. It's insane, but that's what we do.
Even to continue off that, right now we've really had the privilege to continue working with UNICEF, and what we've been doing are these bi-weekly workouts. And I'm not sure if this person asked because they are part of that, but it's just, it makes me think of it at least. We do 2 workouts with these amazing people, and we always do 1 leg day, and then we'll do 1 upper body day with them. That being said, if that is all you can do within your week, it is enough. Oh, you are UNICEF. Welcome, and thank you.
Hi, UNICEF.
That's amazing. So it is enough. That being said, because we provide them with the links to these workouts, they do have access to do their 3rd workout a week. So to break down Tiffany's explanation even a little further, we do 1 day of legs, 1 day of back and shoulders, and 1 day of chest, arms, and abs. And the hardest truth behind the workouts that we do versus the workouts that we'll have our clients do is that we actually don't include abdominal exercises in our training, because the idea is that you're getting to a point intense enough where your core is engaged the entire time.
Correct.
On top of the fact that that abdominal look that everybody wants, that 6-pack, is more linked to your diet than it will ever be linked to the exercises that you're doing. So now, not to keep rambling, but then to go on to the next question, which I'd love Kevin to take on. one of our favorite and most loved clients, I can never remember how old she is because she's always younger in our eyes. But the question is, if a person is of an older age, perhaps in the 60s to 70s range, does what everything we said make a difference? Is it still relevant to you? And my first answer
That's a great question.
But Kevin, I'd love for you to go into that a little bit more in terms of age.
The oldest client that I work with is 90 years old, and he came into me. He was pretty active, but he had stopped weight training for decades because he had this perception that, you know, he couldn't push it too far. Now, he had no cardiovascular disease, he had no hypertension, he had no underlying issues whatsoever. And when he came to the gym and I trained him, when we do high intensity workout, the intensity is based on you. So it's going to be training as hard as you possibly can. It's a very relative thing. And he wasn't used to being pushed so much. But at the end, what he came off with, he told me, he said, I had no idea I could do all of this. I had no idea I could feel my muscles getting bigger. I had no idea that I could, you know, that my body was, you know, still in a place where I could make improvements. I always thought that I'm older, so I got to take it easy. It's the opposite. Aging is essentially the reduction of muscle mass and protein over time, which is why as you get older, it becomes hard to move. It becomes hard to do the things that you were able to do the way you were able to do them, because you're losing muscle mass and you're losing strength. Building muscle mass is even more important when you get older. And as far as the muscle mass component to the weight loss that we're talking about, weight loss should never be your primary goal. Your primary goal is to build as much muscle mass as possible. Now, if you eat a natural diet, no processed foods whatsoever, you train intensely enough, you rest enough, and you put on enough muscle mass. When I say muscle mass, I do not mean looking like me. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about regular lean muscle mass. I am competitive natural bodybuilder. My whole life was designed around, you know, trying to look like Batman, in case anybody.
You're 30 plus years in the making as well, and we live in a society of instant results. So I think it's also really important to recognize that, you know, Kevin looks amazing, and he looks amazing because this is decades and decades of work. And I mean decades, SSS.
You started at 14, right?
I started at 14 years old, and I started training for no longer than 15, 20 minutes, 2 times a week at 16. Mm-hmm. So that's, I mean, I don't train. Everybody always says, Kevin, you must be doing something extra. You must be doing, no, there's no difference. But getting back to our clients, we have clients in their 60s who could possibly compete. We have clients in their 50s who have put on stage, who started bodybuilding in their 50s and were able to get good enough to go on stage and actually do well. We have clients in their 70s. We have clients, you know, as young as actually the youngest client I have is my son, who is 11 years old. And he put 7 pounds on since quarantine, and he's, you know, I think when he goes to middle school next year, he's going to be, you know, a little different from how things were before. He's a little skinny kid from before, and he's starting to fill out a little bit. So it doesn't matter, because you're still human. Yep. Now, everyone has injuries. Everyone has joint problems. Those tend to be inevitable, and you work around them. But as far as how your body works, there's no difference whatsoever. But that was really an excellent question, because it's one that comes up quite a lot.
So we have a lot more questions, and I want to quick answer one of them in terms of how do we get access to weight strength training in the lockdown situation. Fantastic question. This is something we have to do as well until we were lucky enough to get access to weights. You can see like one of my bars in the background. A lot of my equipment I got by luck. Water jugs. Those are what a lot of our clients were and still are using. They kind of equal out to 8 to 10 pound weights. They actually present a bit of a challenge because the water is moving, which makes things feel heavier. Using backpacks or bags of any sort that you can fill with weights. also benefit you. You can wear the backpack for squats. You can hold the handles for bicep curls. And these are just some of the ways that you can just use regular household items to achieve those same intense workouts that you would normally receive in a gym. And because you're using different objects, because your grip on things may be different, it actually tends to be a little bit more intense and a little bit harder than you're used to, because you're exercising differently than what you're used to. Our bodies develop and grow from different things as well as hard things. So the more variation that you can continue to have in your training and your program and whatever it is you're doing, the more you're going to be able to optimize your growth and your body changing, because it will never get used to whatever it is you're doing as long as you make these little changes. We go into Barry's boot camp, yoga.
Yeah,
yoga.
I will
Go for it.
let me take that. The Barry's boot camp, and again, any exercise there's an idea that there's this predominant thing about any exercise is better than no exercise. It's not better than, and I think that's the problem. There's a term called Takonomics. Takonomics is from the Greek kaka, which means worse, and nomics, which is from where economics comes from. And the idea that most of us live in a world where we settle for a lot. We compromise. We compromise with a lot of different things. We don't expect that much of a return on our weight loss. We don't expect to exercise and get too much out of it. We just want a little bit. And that's kind of part of the problem, in that with a boot camps are fun. And don't get me wrong, they're lots of fun. But we have enough clients to be able to talk in terms of patterns. And I think when I first started off training the way that we train today, I was always worried from a science perspective that this form of training wasn't effective, because there's always what's called the error of small numbers. There may be a small number of people who work out the way we work out, who respond to it, but the general population may not. Maybe I just got lucky because the number of people who were working out with me happened to have the same genetics and the same makeup that it worked for them. When I was getting ready to do the Naturally Intense book, a book deal we were working on, I tallied up the number of clients I had actually personally worked with. And at that point in time, it was 735. And that was before UNICEF. UNICEF was another 413. And that was several years ago. So we're talking about well over 1,000 people. And even in the point in time when Erica and Tiffany have been training, because we do 10-minute sessions and because we can see so many people over the course of a day, we really do work with a lot of people. That being said, when one of our clients tends to go to Barry's boot camp, they tend to come back with an injury. They tend to get hurt. Not making it up, they tend to get hurt.
I recently had a client exactly that because of that group. Sorry, I just want to interject because it's so relevant. It was a group environment, so the instructor wasn't watching everybody clearly. We live in the city. It was a small space, and they did bear crawls, and he bear crawled back into a moving treadmill with somebody on it. Please.
Now, the thing is that when you have group exercise, and we do a group class for UNICEF, we are meticulous in making sure every exercise that we select are as universal as possible. And then we create all these variations personally. People will contact me personally and say, all right, I couldn't do this exercise because it hurt a little bit. And like you said, if it hurts, stop doing it. What could I do in its place? And we have recordings of them, with recordings of the workouts, and they can go back and replace one exercise with another one that doesn't cause them pain. And we go back and forth to make sure. The individuality of it is really important. I think when I started bodybuilding all those years ago, that it was really kind of a tradition that was passed on from one generation to the next generation. And there's really not that sense anymore. There's really more of a do-it-yourself. I go on YouTube, I'll figure it out. Or there's more of a group dynamic. I go take a class and I'll get it. It doesn't work that way. We are all individuals, and you tend to get the best results for anything when you have some sort of back and forth on an individual basis. And I'm not saying this to say that personal training is for everyone, because it of course it's you know, the economics of it isn't necessarily such that everyone can afford it. But going on YouTube and finding routines on YouTube and doing them is the worst thing you can do. I mean, there's the number of people who've gotten injured from doing those things. It's terrible. Going on Instagram, following someone's workout, worst thing you can do. If people look on my Instagram account, you will see sometimes me doing an exercise. You will never see a routine. You do not want to do what I do. You do not want to train the way I train, because you will get hurt. It's not relevant. If you train the way Tiffany trained, you're going to get hurt. If you train the way Erica trained, you're going to get hurt. We train based on our bodies, based on the compromises we have to make, and also based on our fitness level, our strength levels, and what our goals are. Well, goals doesn't make much of a difference, but it's tailored based on our bodies. Okay? So if I'm doing presses with a 120-pound dumbbell, I wouldn't expect someone who is 70 years old coming in to work out for the first time, having never trained in their life, to be training that way. The problem with the group environment, especially something like Barry's Bootcamp, it's a formula, and everyone is doing the same formula. It's not changing. It's not, well, okay, what can we do to make sure that, you know, the lowest common denominator in this equation doesn't get hurt? That's not how it's designed. And it's a business. So I think that it can be dangerous sometimes. And as far as hot yoga is concerned, hot yoga is problematic in that it tends to be a little bit competitive, from what I understand. I have never actually done hot yoga, but I have had the honor of training dozens of hot yoga instructors, because hot yoga instructors tend to do two things. They tend to have their shirt off. They need to look good. And then number two, they tend to talk about the fact that the hot yoga that they do is the reason why they look the way they look. In fact, I had a policy that I instituted several years ago where I would no longer train someone who would publicly say that they didn't weight train. Because I think a lot of the yoga practitioners are out there saying, well, you know, I do yoga, I do hot yoga, look how great I look at my abs, look at my biceps, look at my shoulders, look at the handstands I'm doing, it's just from doing that, when they're in the gym training with us. The same with calisthenics. You have the calisthenics guys saying, oh, you know, calisthenics is everything. I do push-ups, I do sit-ups, I go to the park, I do pull-ups, and they're in the gym doing deadlifts with 400 pounds. It's
Kevin,
just,
I also think this is a good way to also segue into how sweating doesn't really correlate with how intense a workout is. So I think that that's a good thing to state too. I think a lot of the perception behind hot yoga is that you're sweating a lot, therefore you're losing a lot of weight, and that doesn't necessarily indicate the intensity of a workout. We have had workouts where we don't sweat at all and we can't even move our arms. Right? So it's not necessarily, sweating doesn't necessarily mean you're losing body fat. You are simply losing water, and that's it.
That's a great point. Yeah. Sweating is your body's internal cooling system.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason it may be, whether it's the temperature, whether it's a physical activity, your body needs to release heat in the form of sweat and water. If you go into a hot yoga studio where it's, I don't know, over 90 or over 100 degrees, you could not do any of the yoga, and you could sit there and you would be as drenched as someone taking the class.
Mm-hmm.
I like to talk about the fact too that I'm from Trinidad, and people in Trinidad are fat. We have lots of people in Trinidad who are fat. If you eat, doesn't matter how hot it is, it doesn't make a difference. If I eat in a hot environment, if I eat in a cold environment, when summer comes here in temperate parts of the world, here in New York, people don't magically lose weight and somehow or the other slim down and look fantastic because it got hotter. But yet there's this magical thinking that persists with the idea that somehow if I do an activity and it's hot, that I'll lose weight. So yoga is a fantastic practice for the mind. It also is a fantastic practice for your body. It can help in a lot of ways, but it can also be dangerous as well, because don't forget that the reality is that muscles are designed pretty much are like rubber bands. And if you can take one rubber band and one rubber band can go all the way here, it has a certain amount of strength. But if you stretch it and teach it to be able to go all the way out here, it's more likely to break. And one of the things that I've had to deal with, and we've all had to deal with people who do a lot of yoga, especially yoga instructors, they don't age well. They tend to have a lot of joint problems, a lot of strength issues, and a lot of muscle tears that they have to deal with because they're overextending. So it's something that should be done always in moderation. But that being said, the mental and spiritual benefits that you can get from it are tremendous, and it's something I do recommend. But if you're doing something like hot yoga, you pretty much should be weight training. And I think a lot of the instructors who I train kind of got to that understanding that to do this and be healthy and make it sustainable, you need some form of strength training, the same way you would with let's say something like dance that Erica does as well.
Yeah, I came in with a lot of injuries that unfortunately still affect me to this day. Kevin will be the first to tell you that we'll do some exercises, and even with no pain, I'm afraid of something with my shoulder because of how much damage I did to it before I started doing stuff to help it. Dances they keep a very archaic mindset where you dance through injury, you push through it. If it hurts, you keep going. And not if it hurts as in muscle burn, but if it hurts as in you just dislocated your shoulder or it popped for a second. Not that I did that or anything, but it really is not about sustainability, which is the most important thing that I learned from doing specifically this program with Kevin and from joining his team was living both my life in a way and training in a way that this is something that I can do for the rest of my life and that will not cause harm, that can only be built upon instead of broken down. Since I am talking now, unless anyone has any more questions about that specifically, we do have a couple people that we're waiting on some questions for a minute. So I'm going to jump over into the diet realm really quick. I want to jump back into that. I was actually a vegetarian when I first started this program. Devout vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for 10 years. And it was not easy because there was a limited amount of foods I was able to have access to for protein, for example. Because animal protein is so prevalent and so important in what we personally eat, it was very hard for me as a vegetarian to have, my egg whites and my lentils and be happy with that. So for someone who is a lacto-ovo-vegetarian, having difficulty balancing proteins and carbs, I think is a great question for Kevin. For someone who has those dietary restrictions, especially in a lockdown, what do you do? How do you handle it? And yeah, what would you basically just have to say about that?
Well, I think one of the beautiful things about being able to work with international populations is that you come across a lot of differences in diets, and it is possible as a lacto-ovo-vegetarian to build muscle. It is possible to be healthy. It is possible to do all those things. It just requires a lot more precision. Now, the thing that's most important in terms of protein intake is that we kind of have this idea, which is really kind of a marketing idea, that you need a particular amount of protein with each meal, and each meal has to have a certain composition. Now, that's fantastic for selling things like protein shakes and the protein powders that are so popular, but it's not really the reality of how your body deals with protein. So let's suppose you have some eggs in the morning, and you have some lentils during the day, and you have some nuts later in the day. Now, the lentils and the nuts don't have all the amino acids that your body needs to rebuild tissue. It's missing some of the essential amino acids, but the eggs did. And the protein and the amino acids your body got from the eggs is going to combine also with the protein you're taking in from the lentils and the nuts. And in your body, you're going to have enough of the amino acids to rebuild everything. So it's not that difficult in terms of juggling the protein. it's really the real challenge becomes how do you eat foods that are so high in fiber and can be kind of carb heavy and maintain a balance with your calories so you're not gaining weight and you're not overdoing it. I think that's the real challenge. But as far as how you do it, always make sure all of your carbohydrate levels, all your carbohydrate intake is high fiber. If it's not high in fiber, don't eat it. And as far as your protein is concerned, if you're having eggs on a regular basis, on a daily basis, even if you are having, a couple eggs on a daily basis, you should be fine. It's really not, you don't really need that much in terms of getting a balance across the board. And I hope that answers the question.
Okay. And then we have an article about this very special person who only ate one meal a day and was a very, very successful natural bodybuilder. So because we have this question about someone only able to eat one meal a day because it's such a hectic schedule, what are your thoughts on that? And I think it'd be great to speak about this person as well.
Yeah, that's Fred. That's Fred Tanya, good friend of mine who came from Kenya, natural bodybuilder. And Fred is not that different from a lot of people who I worked with from the Ivory Coast, from Mali, from Kenya. I'm in touch with a lot of bodybuilders, natural bodybuilders all over the world and have been, over the course of my career. I've been really, really fortunate to be able to, be a presence people reach out to. They either saw my DVD when it came out a couple of years ago, or they knew about me from my bodybuilding career and they would contact me. I would work with them back and forth. And I can understand a lot of where they were coming from because, growing up in Trinidad, we didn't have as much food access as we have here in the United States. And there were days when I would probably have 2 meals a day, sometimes 3. 3 was pretty much most of the time, but sometimes it'd be as little as 2. And it's not ideal. No, it's not ideal at all. The problem is that if you're thinking about long-term health, if you're only having 1 meal a day, most times it tends to be later in the day. And if you're having 1 meal a day later in the day, it means you're not eating that much earlier in the day. That can be a problem for your metabolism. It can be a problem because there has been shown to be a correlation between sunlight levels and energy intake. And that if we take in food at certain times of the day, our body uses it differently. So for example, your body knows that there are cells in your eyes that send information based on the sunlight that tells your body what time it is to these cells in your brain. And it's this really, really beautifully orchestrated mechanism that we all have. And it's that thing where your body knows that, okay, it's early in the day, so we're going to probably have to go get some food, and we need energy to get more food. So we're going to take that energy and we're going to use it for our activity. We're going to burn it off. Your body can tell it's nighttime. And again, evolution-wise, human beings weren't running around as much later in the day as we do today. They really and truly were not. There is some understanding that we may have had some dual sleep patterns, but that's a totally different topic. But the bottom line is that at night and later in the day, your body uses calories differently, which is why, again, it's not as simply as calories in, calories out. So let's suppose I need 2,000 calories to maintain my body weight. If I took those 2,000 calories earlier in the day only, had nothing later in the day, same 2,000 calories, 1 meal later in the day, the person taking the calories later in the day might gain weight, even though they're taking it at a different time, because at that point in time, your body doesn't think you're going to use it. It's kind of like you put gas in your car and you park the car, or you put gas in your car and you go driving. If you eat earlier in the day and you go driving and you do activity, your body's going to utilize it more. You're more likely to utilize it. If you take it later in the day, it's not going to utilize it. Now, unlike a car has a gas tank. We don't have gas tanks. We have fat. The way our body holds on to stuff we don't use is body fat. So you will see an increase in body fat over time. And there have been some studies finding correlations between people who do not eat as many calories early in the day and have most of the calories later in the day with metabolic disease. talking about things like hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. It seems that our bodies do not respond well to only getting calories later in the day. So if you're only going to eat one meal a day, it should probably be, I'd probably say early in the day. At which point in time, you're probably going to get hungry and you're going to eat more than one meal a day. That being said, one meal a day is by no means a good idea. Any more questions?
Sorry, guys, my laptop died. So if you have a black box, Erica, that is the dead computer.
Okay, there you go. There was two of you. It was really interesting.
Yeah. More questions, though. One of them being, if you are vegan and you have an allergy to nuts, for example, and don't want lentils, so basically alternative protein sources, what can someone do? Is it possible? On top of that, why shouldn't we have dairy? And the short answer for dairy is high in fat and very, very processed. But if Tiffany or Kevin want to go off from either of those topics, please go ahead while I readjust my camera.
Yes.
I would like you to handle the dietary part more, especially with someone with allergies. I feel like you are more equipped to answer those questions than I am personally. So I think you should go ahead and answer that one, Kev.
We're running, our time is getting a little bit running a little bit over, but I'll answer this one. Dairy is a weight gain formula for young mammals. Young mammals are in every species. Milk is necessary for growth. If you didn't drink milk before the advent of baby formula, you would die. There's nothing a baby could have besides milk before baby formula existed. So we do need milk. Now, there are some populations who adapted a mutation to be able to continue drinking milk into adulthood. So some people can drink milk as adults and not get stomach upset, but the majority of the planet cannot. Now, that being said, the reason why our bodies evolve with mutations is because of the harshness of the environment. So anybody who can drink milk comfortably had ancestors who were in an environment where if there wasn't enough calories coming in from drinking milk, they probably died out. So it's really, really something that it's an evolutionary thing that we did to survive a particular time. Now, like many attributes of the human body that were really useful for a harsh environment, it's not necessary today. We're not in the same environment anymore. We have tons of different food sources that we can have besides something like milk. And milk is very it's high in fat, it's high in sugars, it's high in sodium. It's great for weight gain. And unfortunately, especially here in the US, the marketing behind milk is so ridiculously high that, it's difficult to kind of to see what the science is, but there is science out there, and drinking milk will not prevent osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is caused by pretty much the loss of calcium due to your diet or lack of exercise, not how much calcium you take in. If you take calcium tablets every single day, eat poorly, you smoke, drink soda, don't exercise, you're probably still going to have osteoporosis. Milk is also not this wonder food. There is no such thing as a wonder food. It's a wonder food for young infants, but as far as if you're trying to lose weight, liquid calories are about weight gain. Once taking liquid calories, it's weight gain. Your body has no way to distinguish any other way, which is why things like sodas and juices are so difficult in terms of how it affects our population, because it causes weight gain. So as far as milk is concerned, I would probably say it's not a good idea if you're trying to lose weight. So I think we have time for one more question.
Good. There's one more left.
Okay.
How heavy do you need to lift in order to build muscle? Can you build muscle from lifting moderately heavy weights? And is it enough to produce stimulus for muscle growth?
Okay, that's a really good question. And simple answer, your muscles have no idea how heavy the weight is. All your muscles know is how much damage was incurred by doing the activity. So, for example, if I'm just starting off and I lift weights that aren't that heavy, my muscles are going to grow because it's not used to lifting weights, period. Now, if I go heavier and heavier, yes, my muscles will keep on getting stronger if I keep on going heavier, but there is a point of diminishing returns where you're going to be lifting so heavy that you're going to damage yourself, and you can't always be putting more and more weight on, because if that was the case, then everyone would be able to bench press 5,000 pounds, and we all know that's not possible. It does plateau. Your body does get to a point where it gets used to it, which is why the weight isn't so important. It's really a matter of the intensity. Now, if you train your muscles to a point of overload where it feels like this is something that we've never done before, this is really hard, we can't go anymore, it's going to cause a significant amount of trauma in the muscles on a cellular level, at which point your body is going to have to repair that damage that was done, and then that reparation is how muscles get bigger and stronger. And so the idea isn't so much a matter of how much weight you need to use, it's the intensity. You know, we like seeing people lifting heavy weights, and we try to equate, you know, heavy weights with intensity, but I can tell you, the heavier you train, the less intense it is. If you're training really, really at your 1 rep maximum, you have to rest a lot in between to maintain that particular weight, at which point your intensity isn't going to be that high. And also, if you're training too heavy, your chance of injury becomes much higher as well. So I would always say it's really not so much a matter about weight, it's really a matter of intensity. It's how difficult you can make it, which is completely counterintuitive. And that's really the secret behind, you know, how our muscles get bigger and stronger. So I think we're coming to the end of it. And I would like to personally thank each and every one of you for coming out. We really, really appreciate the number of people who signed up for it. We had like 50 signups for the webinar, and we're really, 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 really happy to have everyone here. We are going to record this, and it's going to be available as a recording as well. And if anybody has any questions that were not answered during the seminar, you can reach me directly at k@naturallyintense.net. And also our Instagram handles are here. You can contact me at Instagram at naturallyintense. You can contact Tiffany at Tiffany Menges. You can contact Erica at Erica Citrin. Our Instagram does have a lot of information. There's also the blog, naturallyintense.net/blog, where you can get tons of articles. And, you know, again, thank you so much to every single person for coming out, because we really do enjoy spending time sharing all the knowledge that we've been so fortunate to you know, amassed over the years. So I'm Kevin Richardson, the founder. This is Erica Citrin and Tiffany Menges, and together we are Naturally Intense Personal Training. Thanking you so much for coming in, and we will see you all again soon. Thanks again. Bye.